Okay, welcome everybody. This is episode 2 of Flip, Financial Literacy is Power. I'm Stephen Day. I'm here today with Sasha Allenby, who's one of the partners and founders here of Flip. And today we're focusing on panic. And I would say, do we include anxiety with that, Sasha? Or is
Absolutely, yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
And the reason why we're focusing on this is because so much of our relationship to money and finances can easily result in anxiety and panic. It's the worldview that we have. It's our definition of reality sometimes, and it can be crushing. And I've experienced that both for days on end when I'm in a bad situation, but the quintessential late at night, sitting up in bed, can't breathe, my heart's pounding because my reality as I perceive it is crumbling. So we're going to talk about that. Sasha's going to guide us through several things, including a really cool, easy, simple technique that was actually made popular by Navy SEALs, which I don't, once the Navy SEALs start doing it, is it still considered mindfulness?
Definitely, yeah. In fact, Mark Devine, one of the Navy SEALs, one of the former Navy SEALs, has really brought it into play. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. And that's, a lot of times we think that these kind of practices of breathing practices don't fit for us. They're for people on a yoga retreat or something like that, but they can be really essential in high pressure situations. In fact, we have one of our dear friends, Wendy, is bringing these kind of practices into healthcare workers for first responders so that they can show up in the most extreme scenarios and come back into their, I don't know, what do you say, fullness?
Yeah, fullness center, just being able to respond in the moment.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing for folks listening, Sasha, is just to tell them a little bit about yourself and why we should bother listening to you in this field of calm and well-being.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Stefan, and thanks for the introduction. I actually have a background in emotional health, and it came from personal experience. In other words, I had such a chronic level of stress that I was in bed for a couple of years with stress-related illnesses. I didn't really understand that they were stress-related illnesses at the time. But what that led me to was to really start to learn what goes on in the brain and the mechanisms in the brain and how they operate and how you can switch those stress mechanisms off, even in the most difficult situations. So that's been like a good 10-year journey for me now. I co-authored a book on emotional health that was published in 15, 16 languages. Although that's not my field now and not my focus, what it has done is given me a very strong daily practice of being able to really go in and say, hack my emotional health and set up a good foundation of emotional health. So I've been doing that for the past 10 years. And what I'm noticing is what's needed for people in this pandemic and what strategies people need to get through this pandemic, and how a lot of the things that I've been practicing for the last 10 years, both professionally and personally, can be used by people in all kinds of daily situations where they're facing stress and panic, and particularly with the panic around what's going on with the finances at the moment in New York and around the rest of the world.
Beautiful. Yeah, and just to highlight there that in the last 6 to 8 months, I went through some very extreme financial scenarios and myself was really freaking out. And just as a friend, Sasha was a extreme pillar in my life, and just sharing practices with me, meeting up with me regularly to do activities that were de-stressing or centering into, kind of disrupting my general thought patterns. So I can vouch for that. And it's been a real help, Sasha. And so it does kind of feel like odd that okay, we went through that right before this to kind of open us up, or open me up at least, to how we can support here.
Oh, totally. We were training for something there, my friend, for
yeah.
sure, without knowing it.
And just,
I'm sure a lot of people feel like that about the current pandemic, that they've been training in some way for something that they didn't know they were training for.
Yeah. And I think there's something powerful there too, is that we all have our skill sets that now we're offering to other people to help level each other up. So that as a society, we can show up in those ways. Just to give a quick background note, again, if you didn't catch episode 1, to hear a little bit about my background, I'm a video guy, and I've been doing online video and video editing, a lot of actually for wellness stuff for the past 10 to 15 years. And but simultaneously I've been a freelancer, and I've had some dire financial moments where, a client decides not to pay me, or my invoices are kind of stretching thin and I'm coming down to the wire, and have been gripped by those anxieties, have, like I said in the intro, have shot up, in the middle of the night, sat up in bed and just been, freaking out. So I come to this with that and understanding that place. And so hopefully Sasha's and my conversation can have benefit for you where you're at. Real quick in there, I know it's not in our notes, Sasha, for today, but if we could just hear a little bit, like, why is Flip exciting to you? Why are you excited about participating? And what do you feel like you're bringing to the table to help this, this idea, this thread along?
Brilliant. So FLIP is standing for Financial Literacy is Power. And it's a project that Stefan, I, and my partner, Mahmoud Mahmoudi, who you might have seen on the first episode, started several months ago. We've really been noticing the disparity in the economic system in the US. Now, obviously, I come from the UK. I wasn't born here. And so I get to see like some of the places where there's an unfairness in the economic system in the US. And from my background, I grew up in a town that's got a lot of economic challenges, but there were a lot more opportunities for me to break out of those challenges. So now that I've had the opportunity to come here, to live in New York, and to have this fabulous opportunity to be here, I want to share a lot of the resources and skills that I have to support other people to jump over those barriers that are put here for a lot of people in the US. So very passionate about closing those gaps that are here, and also just very passionate about sharing these skills, because I know the money story is the thing that really holds us back, and all the emotions and the memories and the stuff that goes on underneath and in our brains around our money story. So I'm really passionate about helping people to understand that better and to overcome that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for that. And just one more echo there is that, in my experience of Sasha has a lot been, I'm stressing out and I'm worrying about something, and Sasha's able to say the right thing or come in and just be like, you don't have to worry about that, mate. It's up here. And so she really has that, she has cultivated those muscles, and not really even muscles, but like the map, the navigation of how to just like, oh, that's actually over here. And a lot of times our scenarios in life get us thinking down in a tunnel vision. This is what it is. And we need folks around us to help, kind of up over here. So with that, Sasha,
I just want to speak to that a minute, if you don't mind, and just
yeah.
say, this is, I really appreciate what you said right there. And I just want to highlight to people that this is not about glossing over stuff and pretending that it's not there. This is actually about really getting you into a state where you're able to get out of the fear and out of the panic, so that you can start to see the creative solutions that you can't see when your mind is really like gripped by panic and fear. So just want to be like really clear. I've seen a few kind of talks like this where people are just kind of, don't worry, be happy. That's not one of these talks. We're fully acknowledging there is a massive challenges like for people financially at the moment, and we're working with you, if you're one of those people, to help you get in a good place where you can start to get strategies and figure things out, and not just be in the grip of the fear and the panic.
Beautiful. Thank you for that clarification. So in that, what are kind of some of the different types of panic that people are going through right now?
Oh, well, I think probably like some people for the first time are experiencing a multitude of panic on many different levels. We all know what's going on, so I don't want to label the point of the pandemic too much, but just to like break down the two main different types of panic that we're experiencing at the moment. We've got the panic about health. That panic is either, am I going to get sick? If somebody has got sick, or someone in the family has got sick, like, are they going to make it through? There's this whole kind of new thing that we're all navigating, where there's so many people around us. I know we're seeing this a lot in New York, that are sick, that have got sick, that are going through that, who haven't made it through that. And just want to like, my heart goes out to everybody that's going through that on a personal level right now. Really, it is tremendous here in New York, and I know in other places in the world too. So we've got that whole thing that's triggered in our brains now around survival and around health. Then we've got this whole other piece that comes out of it that we're focusing on with Flip, which is the financial side of it. And in New York, that means like, I think the statistics are something like 70% of people have suddenly lost their jobs. And we're in a city where there's already a lot of challenges, where there's already a lot of homeless people that there's not enough resources to take care of. There's already a lot of stretching of the system. And now we've got 70% of people that are suddenly finding themselves unemployed that couldn't have even conceived or perceived that in January. So there's a whole nother level of stuff that gets triggered off for people around like, what am I going to do? Where's all this going? Like, and all the kind of like thinking and fear that goes with that. And so it's the second group that I want to address today, the group of people that have either lost their jobs, or because of gig economy and things not circulating, they're not able to go out there and do their jobs, or are in fear of losing their jobs. That's the group that I'd like to be working with and talking with today.
So everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of everybody. Yeah, it's kind of everybody. I mean, I know some people that still did get to keep their jobs in all this, and we've got friends that have kept their jobs and are extremely grateful to have done so. But the huge majority of, and we're speaking for New York because that's where we are, but a lot of this applies to people outside of New York. But a huge majority here have lost their jobs or are in fear of losing them. And unlike the UK where I come from, in the UK, they've been told that their salaries will be covered for the rest of the year, at least 80% of their salaries up to a certain amount. So there's not the same kind of survival on a mass going on in a mindset as there is here in the US.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge too, I make jokes sometimes, and I do that a lot out of discomfort. It's one of my ways to like transition into like, okay, we can deal with this. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or desensitized to what you might be going through. So just know that's one of my coping mechanisms. So I don't want you to feel like I'm like making light of a very challenging situation.
I'm glad you brought that up, because our friendship there's a lot of banter and a lot of kind of like poking at each other and jokes out of endearment. So, you know, I want to try and keep some of that here, so we're not just in this like really serious vibe, like just crushing through all this like heavy stuff, while at the same time deeply taking it seriously and deeply affected by it.
Yeah, beautiful. So I guess right now I just, want to talk about from my perspective, some of the panic that I've experienced and what that has looked like for me. And I've had it over different phases of my life, and it tends to all be related to finances. As Mahmoud said, that his father said that, financial problems are the best problems to have. So I'm fortunate that they have been financial scenarios, that they haven't really been life-threatening, but in that moment, it does feel like it's life-threatening because so much of my existence and definition of self is based on how I'm doing financially. So there's that. And for me, that has often, it results in either one, like paralysis, where it's like, I'm someone that knows a lot of practices in mindfulness, but my ability to connect with those in the moment seems almost impossible. To just like, the next day I was like, oh, I could have done this breathing technique and that would have been helpful. But in the moment, I'm just kind of like, because it feels so existential. And then the next kind of, response to that is kind of a more dull response, but it takes longer, meaning that I had that initial panic, but I might not respond to what is causing the panic for a day, a week, or whatever, and I might be very avoiding of it. And sometimes it results in me staying in bed, just to kind of like write it. Like I'm going to watch The Office for the next 8 hours to just avoid looking at this thing or feeling this thing. So what causes those reactions, and why do people have that kind of stuff, I guess is. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, actually, because the thing that we don't get taught that would be most useful for us all to understand is that when we get into any kind of fear, particularly if we've had a history of a similar kind of fear, then our brain goes into what's called a survival mechanism in the brain. I'm not going to geek out on the brain science too much. I know it's exciting to me, but boring to everybody else. But what I do want to do is really just get that we're either in this place in our brains where we're thriving and we're able to make conscious choices and we're able to like see different parts and possibilities, or if we get triggered into the survival mechanism in the brain, and that's actually what you've described, Stefan, because there's one thing that happens where we freeze, and we might freeze like literally freeze like a deer in the headlights, or it might be that very subtle freeze that you're talking about, like a kind of a stagnation and an inertia where you just like stop dead in your tracks and you sit and you check out and you don't want to look at it. Or we might like run away from it altogether. But that feeling that you got in the brain where you know stuff but you can't quite connect to it is very common, because you shut down the higher center of your brain to go into survival. Because the whole point of survival, it's like an old mechanism that was designed for like running from a tiger, you know, back in the time when we were primal. You know, it's like super old, but it's still there and it still gets triggered. And in some ways it's just literally trying to protect us from, like, say we had a bad experience in the past and this reminds us of that bad experience. It kind of is a mechanism that's not there working against you, but is actually there to try and protect you. But what it ends up doing is we lose touch with that creative side of ourselves, like I said, and we just go into this very kind of limited version of ourselves. And it's that I want to really work with people to kind of be able to hack. Over this session, we're going to, like you said, do a breathing session on that. And the next session, if anybody's interested, we'll go deeper into the brain piece on that. But it is literally that survival response that a lot of people have been triggered into right now, and that we need to be able to address, hack, however you want to phrase it, so that we can get beyond it, so that we can like see strategies and get out of panic, and just, you know, even for our general health. Because when that is activated, when survival is activated, it's not designed to be a long-term activation. And so that's when we start getting all these stress-related symptoms, when it's been activated for so long. And that's why I was in bed sick for a number of years, because mine was just like switched on for years at a time to a point where I couldn't function.
In that state of you know, that fight or flight response, what can we do to, you know, circumvent it? As you're saying, the word you used was disrupt earlier on.
Yeah, totally. We're gonna get to that in just 1 second. What I want to just briefly cover before that, so people can understand like where this is coming from. We need to get that, like, a lot of people have different kinds of responses to this, you know. So you might see like one person out there literally just nailing the whole situation and not having any challenges at all, and you'll see somebody else who's literally curled up and paralyzed by fear. And, you know, as I've highlighted before, I used to be the former, the one that would curl up and paralyzed by fear. And so it's really important to understand that a lot of our earlier experiences, particularly around money and finances, get stored on our subconscious, get stored in our mind, and keep getting re-triggered when similar situations arise. So it's super important to understand that, because a lot of people get really lost in the, oh, why is he coping and I'm not coping? Or why is she coping and I'm not coping? Or even why are they coping and I'm not coping? A lot of people get lost in that. And really, the difference is that if you learn a lot of different cool strategies, like Mamad, the speaker that you had on last week, he learned a lot of cool strategies. So he was in a lot of financial challenges, but he learned from his father to strategize. Whereas if you've got a lot of examples where the people around you froze in fear, got paralyzed, got distracted, weren't able or didn't have the tools to focus on it, then that's probably going to be like what you've learned. So I just want to acknowledge, like, we're dealing with not just what's going on in this particular challenge with the pandemic, but we're dealing with our all histories that get triggered around money and finance, and all the feelings and emotions and responses, just so that we understand that it's not just about this pandemic, it's about our history and our story with that, and what gets triggered in us because of that.
can we go into just for a second around just self-compassion and
Yeah.
self-care in that thing? Because I feel like, you know, like this is a good example of Mamad being like, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. And it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
dude, there's shame. I've got, you know, hundreds of years of shame that I got to deal with on this scenario. So just knowing that it's not a quick turning boat for some of us, and that we need to coax and hold ourselves in a loving place as we learn new strategies and new patterns. Anything?
Yeah, this is massive. Yeah,
Yeah.
what you just said is like probably the most fundamental piece, and probably like the piece that maybe I should have said at the start, but I'm reiterating it now. Like, this is, like we said last week, the financial stuff, not knowing the financial literacy and how to budget and stuff, that's not your fault, you know. And this piece around not knowing the emotional literacy piece, the piece about how to take care of yourself in these times, is not your fault either. We're talking about a lot of learned behaviors, and it's not the fault of the people you learn them from either. This is not one of those blame games where you kind of like point a finger back to your childhood and blame everybody. Completely the opposite. We're talking about patterns that are built up over time, things that you maybe learned from the people that you grew up with, that they learned from the people that they grew up with, generational stuff. So it's definitely not about pointing the finger anywhere. And the thing that we're learning to do with this work, hopefully the thing that we're imparting with Flip, is that there needs to be a level of compassion for yourself and a level of understanding. And that piece about shaming, we're going to like work past and work through. But it needs to be like a ton of kindness towards yourself, whatever stage you're at with this, because you really are just learning a new load of tools that you've got to really learn really fast on the job for this particular pandemic. And just to have like a lot of compassion and care for yourself as you do that.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I know you're going to give us some examples in a minute, but did you want to talk a little bit more about the benefits of, you know, you utilizing some of these practices? I know we've kind of talked about, I don't know if that's just really calling forward and naming what the benefits are.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main benefits or the main purpose, I'm going to give you like the most simple breathing practice in a minute, like the most simple one that we can do. And like, I've got probably about 7 or 8 different breathing practices that I weave in and out of throughout the day. But this one is going to be like the most simple one. And the reason I like it is it's really good for disrupting that fear center in the brain and how that impacts the nervous system. So you're literally going to be able to, in any situation, hack the nervous system and hack the brain to get yourself out of that fear response. And so that's, there are a lot of like side purposes, you know, once you've hacked that fear response, then, and you out of a stress-based response, your immune system gets a lot stronger. We all need a piece of that right now. But really just the point of doing these tools is to get you out of that fear-based response that you've described, so that you can just really be there in the moment and deal with what's on your plate at the moment, and create a series of moments where you're able to deal with things instead of doing that like paralysis thing that we talked about a little bit earlier.
So we're going to hear, Sasha's going to share with us the practice now that is made popular by Mark Divine, whose name I'm completely falling in love with because it's such a divine name.
Brilliant. So yeah, like I say, I picked this technique because you can do one of two things with it. And the thing that we need more than anything is some techniques or tools to practice when we're feeling okay, so that we build up our resilience and we build up a baseline. And then some tools and techniques that we practice when we're freaking out and panicking. And over the series of these interviews that we do with Flip, I'm going to give you a bunch of different tools and strategies. The reason I've picked this one today to start with, out of all the different tools and strategies I use, is you can use this for both. In other words, you can sit there for 10 minutes at the start of the day before you go out there, before you go into the world. You can sit there and do this and build up some resilience. And you can use exactly the same exercise a little bit later on in the day if something comes up and you get triggered or you get an emotional response. So you can use it in both scenarios. So that's why I love it. Super simple. So shall I take you through it, Stefan? I know I took you through it at the start of the episode just as a practice so you could get a sense of it. Shall I take you through it again now so that you do it live with everybody?
Great. And does it have a name?
Yeah, it's box breathing or square breathing.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, what we're going to do is just empty your lungs as much as you can without forcing and straining.
Now, I noticed that when you say that, the first thing I do is I take an inhale.
Okay, that's all right. I'll wait for you. I'm okay. Watching your breath. Yeah. So empty it out. And then breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out for 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4, 2, 3, 4. And again, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. One more, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Okay, so when you're ready, open your eyes. And obviously we did that for like, I don't know, like 20, 30 seconds. But if you're really in a very kind of like stress state, you're going to want to take that to one side and do that for like several minutes until you can start to feel some kind of impact. What's the sense, Stefan, even after just doing a couple of rounds? Any changes at all there for you?
Yeah, I definitely feel I feel like I'm aware of the edges of my body. So I just feel my body. I feel in my body, and definitely a lot calmer. And maybe it was because my eyes were closed, but the lights feel a lot brighter.
Right.
When I open my eyes.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, you can do that anywhere. Like they say, like usually don't do these kind of exercises when you're driving or riding around on a bike. You know, if you're, say, a delivery person at the moment, then you do that outside the shop waiting to pick up a delivery and take it to somebody, rather than while you're on your bike, just because you want to make sure you're in a kind of a still place to do these kind of things. But you can do that in any scenario where you start to feel the panic coming in. And that's including, you know, people like essential workers that are out there that are really like on the job like all day, that have had any kind of like fear or stress. When you get any kind of fear or stress about your money and finances, you know, wherever you are, you can do that exercise, and it doesn't discriminate. You know, everybody can do that exercise, and it can be like just super useful for disrupting and for building up resilience as well at the same time.
Is there anything else about that practice or where we're at right now that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just want to add a few more things. I know we're coming to the close of the session, but there's a few more things that I want to add about that. And the first one is just to reiterate that the more you do it when you're not in a stress state, the more that you can access it when you are. So it's a practice. You know, you practice it when you feel great, so that when you don't feel great, you've got a strategy. That's the first thing.
And you do that same practice. It's not like you do one practice offline and one practice online. It's like,
no, that's why I picked this one to start with, because it's one of the few ones that you can do, like when you like to build up resilience and to work with a stress response. You know, I literally used it a lot in the first few weeks. I've got a lot of different strategies, but in the first few weeks of the pandemic, when all this crazy news was coming in, I was using it all the time. You know, it was literally my go-to, and it hasn't been for a while, but I adapted to using it a lot more when we were going through this particular pandemic, because I know it's just like so instant on affecting the nervous system.
I'm sorry, I disrupted you. Yeah.
No, you didn't disrupt me at all. Actually, there was a siren going by, which is kind of like a sign of the times right now
Here
in New
too.
York.
I turned my mic off. We live a couple blocks away from each other. So
Exactly, yeah, I think it's probably the same one. So a couple more things I wanted to say. You know, we've talked a lot about just the general nature of the pandemic, and I know a lot of people we're divided in our audience between people who have to go out to work and are still essential workers, and also people that have to stay at home. So I'm talking a little bit to those people, particularly in New York, who are in these 200 square feet apartments or rooms, or just kind of like in these boxes and not getting to go out as much as they would like to in these times. I would just say that if you can disrupt even if you've got the luxury of staying at home, if you get in a very stagnant state where you're just kind of all in one mood for one time, then that can be very kind of like tiring. So you can use the breathing stuff, you can use this disruption exercise. I'm going to share this one and a number of other ones in the links and the resources, so if you want to develop the practice more. But the breath is one thing that you can do when you're in that stagnant state that's really going to create like a disrupt to that state and give you a different resource and a different way of tackling things and seeing things. And just two more things I'd like to add if I've got time, Stefan.
yeah, you do.
Okay, brilliant.
Depends on how fastly you can deliver them.
like lightning, my friend. So just we're going to talk more about the brain in the next session. So I won't go into it too much, but I just want to say that how you start the day at the moment is super important. You know, your brain changes with every interaction, with every experience you have. And so if you start the day with a breathing exercise like this is going to set the scene and set the tone so much in a different way than if you start the day with the news on the numbers and what's going on and the pandemic and the panic. So I'm not saying ignore what's going on, but like if you're going to read the news, like do 10 minutes of the breathing first and just really see what a difference that's going to make to how you respond and how you react to what's going on.
And maybe do the breathing practice after you read the news.
Before, during, and after as well. There's been a couple of times where I've had to do it after the news. I'll freely admit. And final thing I wanted to say, like we talked a little bit about not being ashamed about not dealing with all this too well. If you're not dealing with all this too well, so if that's you and you're really just finding it very difficult to deal with this, I just want to really encourage, and we're going to build on this in the next session, but we need to be able to meet ourselves wherever we're at with whatever emotional response we have. We've been taught a lot in this society to reject our emotional responses, to only talk about when we're doing well, and to push down the emotional responses when we don't feel good. And I just really want to, as a lead into the next session, just really speak to people who, when you're freaking out, the key thing is to be able to learn to sit with whatever's coming up for yourself, whether you use the breath to do that or another technique, so that you're not rejecting yourself if you're not coping so well with what's going on.
Anything else? Let's make sure we're totally clear. Is this where you want to give us a little bit of a tidbit on where we're going to go in the next episode that we talk with you about the brain and why that's valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the next episode, we've touched on the brain a little bit, and I'm not going to hit you with a bunch of neuroscience or, like geek out on the brain. But what I want to address in the next episode is what happens to us, when our thoughts start going spiraling into catastrophic thinking, and we start to fast forward, and suddenly we're in this idea that we're going into an apocalypse and everything's falling apart. And, we go into this catastrophic spiral. So what I want to do in the next session is show people how to disrupt that catastrophic spiral of thinking, so that you can, again, be present in the moment and figure out what you've got to do. So today we've come at it from the angle of the breath. The next time we meet, we're going to come at it from the angle of, but what about when I'm lying awake and I'm paralyzed with fear and I'm thinking about the future and worrying about the future? How do I deal with that without just glossing over it and pretending that everything's okay?
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, that's our time for today. So we're trying to we're putting this content in multiple different locations. It's on Facebook, it's in YouTube. We have a website, FlipThis.Life. where you can connect to all those venues, and we're going to have a way for you to track and follow and make sure you get the updates on the new episodes if you're looking for that material. If you find someone that, or you know of someone that this could be very useful for and this could be a resource for, please help them connect with the material and pass it along to them. Do you know, I mean, this is very self-contained, very rich content, Sasha. Are we going to be having any other resources that we want to put in the comments below, or?
Absolutely. I'm going to put immediately below this, I'm going to put a bunch of resources, and I'm going to do a blog on FlipThis.Life that goes into the breath stuff more deeply, if that's something that you want to like geek out on a little bit with me.
Beautiful. And that's so much part of what Flip This is about is, you know, we're in one scenario, and what practices and tools can we just flip it a little bit? So we're not avoiding the story, but we're just flipping our perspective on it and flipping our ability to respond to it so that we can cultivate and show up in the way that we want to.
Brilliant.
Have a beautiful day.
Have a beautiful day, and our thoughts are with you all. Like, just we'll get through this together.
Awesome. Okay, beautiful.
Brilliant.
Ciao for now.
Ciao for now.